Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
The business of Memphis music, tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. I'm joined tonight by Kevin Kern, Vice President, Memphis Convention and Visitors Bureau. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
Pat Mitchell-Worley, founder of Fanfare CR. Thanks for being here. Megan Carolan is a local musician and many other things in the local Memphis music scene. Elizabeth Cawein is founder of Export Memphis. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks.
So I wanted to do a show for a while, and we've talked about it on things going on with Memphis music, and you and I got to talking somewhere. And so I think the easiest thing, because all of you wear many hats in terms of music in Memphis and the business of it and so on, and I'll just go around and let you kind of describe, and in part because it started with a conversation we had about Export Memphis, talk about your involvement and talk about what the organization is, and we'll do that with everybody.
Sure. So Export Memphis is essentially an export office for Memphis music. It's modeled after the international export strategy. You see countries around the world that do this, that export their music and create opportunities for musicians. And so I felt that that was a scalable model, and I wanted to execute it on the city level. So about 2 years ago, in partnership with the Chamber initially, I launched Export Memphis. And actually just recently, we're officially chartered as a nonprofit organization. So we essentially exist to create opportunities for musicians to showcase their music, and hopefully in doing that, drive results in music tourism, economic development, and brand awareness of Memphis across the board. And prior to that, and sort of still alongside that, for about 6 years now, I've had my own music PR agency called Signal Flow, working with Memphis musicians exclusively and also music and tourism, music business, music nonprofits as well.
All right, and we'll dig into a bunch more of that as we go, but I'll go to you, Kevin, from the point of view of the Convention and Visitors Bureau. I mean, this is a big tourism draw. There's economic impact across the board. Talk a little bit about that.
Of course it is. I mean, the Memphis Convention and Visitors Bureau, our job is to bring visitors to Memphis. Our brand is music. I mean, the tagline, Memphis, birthplace of rock and roll, home of the blues. Tourism itself is a $3 billion plus industry in this city. So, of course, music has a tremendous economic impact. It is Elvis, it's B.B. King, it's blues, rock, soul that's bringing folks to this town. So $3 billion for tourism means that $3 billion for music as an economic impact in our city, because that is the main drawing point.
All right, and again, we'll dig into more of that. But Pat, talk about, we talked before the show about how to introduce you and which of your many hats we would lead with. We led with Fanfare CR. Talk about the scope and the many different ways, Beale Street Caravan, that you're involved in Memphis music and have been involved.
Okay, well, Fanfare, CR really focuses on working with arts organizations, not specifically music organizations, but Memphis Slim House is one of my clients. I went from a consulting role. Now I'm on the advisory board for the organization, and it's a community center for musicians, and it allows them an opportunity to not only collaborate but to learn about the business of music. So as a part of Slim House, there are members. The space serves as a rehearsal space. It serves as a place where artists can come together and they can go in and record a demo, or they can host an event there. Then there are a lot of educational forums, workshops that we do there. Also, Memphis Slim House has a loan program that offers us the only loan program specifically targeted for musicians in the city of Memphis. And it offers them a 5% interest rate, which is phenomenal. And if they're from the neighborhood, it's a 3% interest rate. And that allows artists to borrow money to help their career move forward. And it's up to $10,000. So it's really helpful for artists to be able to go out and get capital, because it's hard for them to walk into a bank and ask for a loan based on, based on what, hey, here are my royalties. What does that mean? So there's that piece. Then I also serve on the board of the Recording Academy. Our chapter, the Memphis chapter, goes from Memphis, St. Louis, New Orleans are included, and I chair, fortunately, I chair educational development for musicians and for the music industry. So as a part of that, it's creating events and opportunities for artists and for the industry to learn more about all this crazy change that's moving at a record pace in the music industry. Every day there's something new. And so that part is as a volunteer. Then I also host Beale Street Caravan, which is a globally syndicated roots radio program that's out of Memphis. And we record artists live. We're magazine formatted, and we do a lot of Memphis music.
Okay, and again, all that we can keep going into, but Megan, I'll bring you in. I introduced you as a musician. Mm-hmm. You also work in marketing at New Memphis Institute, and you're a board member of the new organization that Elizabeth. What else have I missed at all in terms of your connections to Memphis music?
Well, I previously met Elizabeth and Pat through the Memphis Music Foundation, which was my first internship ever here in Memphis. And I just came up here in Memphis for music. I'm originally from Pennsylvania, but I moved here 7 years ago to study at the University of Memphis. Studied music business there and just really got involved and ingrained in the music community since then.
And you're a performing musician as well.
Mm-hmm.
What instruments you play? You play locally, you've played around the world, I think, right? Am I right about that? Or am I screwing that up?
Yes, when I toured Germany and Austria with the University of Memphis choir. And locally, I usually do singer-songwriter stuff. It's more like singing and guitar, and I also play ukulele because I work with the Memphis Ukulele Band. So, yeah.
Memphis is known for its ukulele playing, obviously.
Yes, there's a ukulele scene here.
Yeah. Okay. Kevin, I want to go back to you. I mean, in terms of you previously, you've actually been with the CVB for what we just talked about, 3 months.
A little over 90 days.
Yeah. Before that,
review.
you were with Elvis Presley Enterprises.
I sure was for 12 and a half years with Elvis Presley Enterprises, and of course, Graceland is the cornerstone of our tourism industry. It was the jumping off point for this becoming an industry in 1982. Beale Street was still boarded up and coming back, and our city was, in the midst of a rebirth. And it's been great to see our city progress. But Elvis is a part of our music identity. Some people still don't embrace Elvis, but other people know Elvis around the world. You can get in the back of a cab in Budapest, Hungary, and say I'm from Memphis, and they know where you're from because of Elvis Presley. So he's a big part of our music brand, and he's been bringing folks to our town, as have the legendary blues music of Beale Street, rock and soul. It's the basis of our industry. It's our city's identity. We have the FedExes and St. Jude's, but people come here for that music experience because we've got so much rich culture and history here, and it's rooted in our music.
It is interesting. I mean, people lose sight of that. I mean, what you just said about Memphis in that name, and if you've traveled around and you say you're from Memphis, it has a kind of cachet. It has this sort of, that some people hear, and we talk a lot about the legitimate problems in Memphis on the show, with education or it's crime or whatever, issues that all cities in America have. But that negativity about Memphis, outside of Memphis, it is funny to get into a cab. It is funny to be in a restaurant and say you're from Memphis. Talk about how your organization sort of plays on that and talks about promoting Memphis music and exposing Memphis music to other parts of the country.
Yeah, and the world. I mean, actually, we just produced a songwriters exchange with Liverpool where we had two Liverpool artists who came together across 2 weekends of activity in both cities. And when we went to Liverpool and did our finale concert, I mean, the people that we met the entire time we were there, not just at that event, the appreciation that they have for Memphis music, and frankly, what I always love, the knowledge that they have of Memphis music is so deep as well. It's really, really refreshing. If anybody ever sort of feels down on the city, I recommend you travel, just go a few hundred miles, but certainly a couple thousand will help as well, because people outside of the city know and appreciate Memphis music. And it's always refreshing to me. Actually, I went to graduate school in England too, so I was around people constantly who I said I was from Memphis, and it was like, I whipped out my cool card. Like, they just thought that was the coolest thing ever. And I think that that's something that we're able to capitalize on in reality,
it very
right?
much comes not from, I mean, there's nothing wrong with St. Jude or these other organizations that Kevin mentioned. It comes from the music, right?
Absolutely. But I think, too, there is something that is really, really ingrained, and the music is a big piece of that. But you look across the cool things that have come from Memphis, outside of the music sector, we're DIYers, we're entrepreneurs, we start things, we invent things. That's true across the board. We can come up with a million examples. Firsts, originals come from Memphis, and that's really, really true and really rich in music. But I think that what makes an export strategy so easy to me in some ways and so smart is that people outside the city love our music, and that, you know, artists who are going on tour who live in Memphis, they're already saying that they're from Memphis when they go out because it's a part of their identity, and it's something that really can build connection between them and an audience because people love our music.
So from the point of view of Beale Street Caravan, which is, again, global, right? That connection of Memphis music and the identity, you know, that people have with it.
Yes, the show, when the show started out, it was more of a blues-based show, and it's interesting because there were so many directions that we could go in. But now we've focused in because we recognize that there's so much talent here, and we really need to help them get out and let the world hear them. So it's funny when you're, you know, radio is this magic world where you don't know if anyone's listening as you put the show out there. And to have an artist from Memphis get feedback from Siberia or from Japan and New Zealand, Australia, or around the country, it's always really interesting that people latch on to that, and they have a response to it. There isn't it's like a love us or hate us kind of thing. We get something out of you. Memphis gets something out of you. Our music gets a reaction. And so the show has been fortunate enough that we have a fan base and we have radio stations around the world that are playing the show, and that's what they want. They want to hear about Memphis. They want to hear what's from Memphis. We want to hear the real thing. What are the locals doing? What do the locals listen to? And then, you know, also when you're here, people are like, oh yeah, I just go see that band. There's a dime a dozen. Bands are everywhere. You know, that's sort of the different reaction because we're so used to it. We're so spoiled by it.
Right. And from your point of view, as a person who's probably the newest to Memphis, I mean, at this table, you came to University of Memphis. Yeah. Your thoughts on that, and your thoughts on, again, it was music business, but your thoughts as an outsider, for lack of a better word, you're not, you know, you've been here 7 years now, but on that appeal and the attraction of Memphis music.
So what really brought me first to Memphis was music. That's why I came to Memphis. I wanted to go to college in a city that had a music scene and music industry, and Memphis drew me here. And once I got here, it was amazing because it's one of the coolest, best things about Memphis is that I was reading in textbooks music history and about different things that happened. But when I got to Memphis, I could actually meet these people. They were here, and they wanted to teach me, and they wanted to pass along their knowledge. So that was the most amazing thing. My dad's a musician too, and I was telling him about all the people I was meeting. I was like, oh, I met this guy named Al Bell at the Grammy event. And he's like, what? Yeah. Oh my God.
I think people don't realize, I mean, and it's not just true in music. This is a city where you can meet people real quickly. It's a big, small town where, and it's interesting to hear that about the music industry as well. You know, certainly in the business community and the political community, you can just meet people with a little bit of effort on some level. It's very strange that way.
Or 1 degree of separation that we have.
Right, the 1 degree of separation. Back to you, Kevin. Elvis Presley Enterprises, Graceland, obviously there's huge investment that they're putting in. Your thoughts on that from the, you know, what is, you talked about people who, or you alluded to, some people maybe haven't embraced Elvis. But clearly, and I heard, you know, with the most recent, you know, Death Week and all the celebration, all the activities that were going on.
Elvis Week.
Elvis Week. Sorry. 22 years. I'll get it right soon. Elvis Week, people talking about, well, I can't believe, you know, how long can this last? How long can this, you know, this former star hold this appeal? But clearly, Elvis Presley Enterprises believes there's no end in sight, given the amount of money they're investing, this new arena they're talking about.
You know, nobody invests over $130 million without any research. So it shows that the potential is there to grow the visitor numbers, to bring even more people to Memphis. That is our goal as a city, as a county, as an organization, as the Memphis Convention and Visitors Bureau, and Graceland sees that potential. And so, that's a major investment that will continue to build their numbers, now at an average of 600,000 annually, to increase that. And, a good chunk of that is coming from international. About 20% of their visitorship is international. There are other American cities that would love to have that many international visitors coming here. And that's our brand. Our global brand is music. There are a lot of great assets in this community, but music is our identity, has been and probably always will be, because we are still generating great music in this city. We're a great live music scene today. We have the Boo Mitchells of the world creating Grammy Award-winning hits right here in our own backyard. So music continues, and Elvis will always be with us. Long after everybody at this table is gone, they'll still be talking about Elvis.
Well, it's interesting too, some news, and I don't have Bill Dries here today to fact check me, so I'm just going to go ahead and screw this up.
Go for it.
But with Elvis Presley Enterprises, proposing this new arena, a 5,000-ish seat arena, they came out, they spoke to County Commission this week about it not being something that's going to compete with the FedEx Forum. It's going to fill the space. It's essentially going to compete with, and I think we talked about on the show recently, with the Landers Center down in DeSoto County. But it was interesting to hear them, I can't remember his name, I wish Bill were here, from the person from Elvis Presley Enterprises talking about trying to do more local musicians there, trying to do, not just bring in traveling acts, but have more of a connection to local music.
Right. The whole purpose behind the new visitor and entertainment complex and museum complex called Elvis Presley's Memphis is not only telling the Elvis story, but the Memphis music story, because that includes Johnny Cash, Carl Perkins, Jerry Lee Lewis, B.B. King, Aretha. The list goes on and on and on and on, and that's part of our story. And people are not only coming here from Elvis. People at Graceland realize that. That's why Beale Street is so important. That's why Stax and Son are also so important, because our music story as a whole continues to bring people here, and the desire is to have more local acts not only featured whatever may come in the future, but also what is there now by showcasing our broad range of musical influences in the city to the visitors that come each and every day, and including today. Well,
and again, we talked about recently, that arena could bring Memphians down to Graceland in a way that people say, well, I don't have any interest in Elvis, I don't have any interest in going down to Graceland, that's kind of a tourist attraction, but I want to go see XYZ act down at that area, and then they'll see all this kind of explosion of activity and development down there.
Right, and I think it's valid certainly to talk about competition between venues of similar size, but I also think that anytime you introduce something new into the marketplace like that, it's inevitably going to bring people, to your point, who maybe have never come to see a show of that size before. And so if we can actually create a new consumer by bringing new venues into the marketplace, to me that's a net win for the entire industry. So if we have more venues that are going to potentially get someone out to a show who hasn't come in 10 years, who then may go, oh, well, I like that act, I like that local band, I'd like to go see more things like that. And if we can sort of train a consumer based on a new option that might get them excited and sort of build momentum, I think that's a huge net win, not just for that particular neighborhood or community, but for Midtown, for downtown, for the entire city.
Yeah. I want to go back to some of what you were talking about, a support of local musicians. It is not easy to be a musician. Not everyone has hit records and makes a ton of money off this. Even artists who, in this new world of streaming music, it's harder to make money off albums. It's hard to make money as a musician. And I'm curious, we talked about, say the organization again, Memphis Slim House. Memphis Slim House. Other groups that are out there that are trying to support what is a very difficult road, and what more can be done, to support local musicians through, what does that entail?
Well, first of all, there are a lot of organizations in Memphis that focus on music. Just in as far as nonprofits go, there are over 30 of them, and that goes from the Memphis Symphony to the Memphis Songwriters Association. So between all of those organizations, they have different programs. For the symphony, the opera, the large arts organizations, they're focusing on creating new work, and they're employing musicians. And then some organizations help with the craft itself. Unfortunately for us, we don't have as many organizations that focus on the business of music, which is what a lot of artists here need. They can tell, they'll tell you that I can figure out my craft. I've got plenty of teachers around me. And so there's Memphis Slim House, there's the consortium, there is help through the Recording Academy, and then you've got a lot of programs that are working with youth, and those youth are learning, young people are learning the business more so than I say the current generation of musicians that are working across the city are. Through Stax, the Memphis Music Initiative, they're learning the business of music, and that's a piece that's been missing for the music industry, is just that general education. If you don't go to the University of Memphis and get a degree in music business, then how do you learn how the music industry works? And a lot of our musicians have done it through trial and error, and a lot of them have been able to go to places like Slim House, before that the Memphis Music Foundation, and learn a little bit about what's going on in the global economy as far as music goes. And the resources that exist for artists here, I wish we had more. In other cities in other cities you can go to an entertainment attorney, and if he likes your music, believes in your band, thinks that I can do something with this artist, then he will put money and invest in you and help you make it over some of those hurdles. Or you may have a label that does that. You may have a publisher that does that. And since we don't have that strong foundation of infrastructure here, then artists have to figure it out themselves. Or they have people like Elizabeth and what the Export is doing, what Signal Flow is doing, that helps them sort of bridge that gap. How can I figure out how to do this? They've become a lot more savvy with crowdfunding and finding other ways to get income. And once again, the Memphis Slim's Front Loan is another piece that adds to that puzzle of putting money together to grow this entrepreneurial effort that you're doing every day. That's how you make money.
Yeah. Megan, your point of view as a musician, as somebody, like a lot of musicians, you have a day job. I'm sure you love your day job, at New Memphis Institute, but for many artists of various types, we're talking about music today, they have to have a day job. What resources do you wish were out there in Memphis for the community of musicians?
Well, I really appreciate what Elizabeth's doing right now, because that was something that was so needed in Memphis. Before, I have gone to different festivals around the country, and I bumped into Elizabeth and Pat at South by Southwest in Austin and saw what different cities were doing for their musicians, including like having export offices, including doing different research on how much music was bringing to the local economy. And I'm so happy that that's happening right now, especially with what Elizabeth's doing with the Music Export Memphis, because musicians and music is definitely a wonderful thing in Memphis. But it's not just the past, it's the future. And local musicians are the future of Memphis.
Talk about South by Southwest. What all you did, was that this past spring?
Sure, yeah. In March of 2017, this year, we did a day party, very similar to what we've done at the Americana Festival in Nashville, and we'll be doing that again, actually, next weekend, coming up in September, we're doing that. So we try to cram as much Memphis into one day as we possibly can, and the centerpiece of it is a lineup of great music. So we brought 6 bands to Austin, and we presented a great event. We had a line around the door. We had more than 1,200 people there, representing 67 U.S. cities, 17 countries, just that we were able to survey. So just a huge presence of people there taking in Memphis music and getting to know Memphis too. Through partners like the Convention and Visitors Bureau and New Memphis, we were able to really talk to people about why Memphis is a great place to visit, but also a great place to live. And that's kind of, that's definitely an interest point for us in Music Export Memphis as well, is talent attraction. I believe that music is a tool, creative economy is a tool, nightlife is a tool to get people to move to a city.
Well, and you get to the point where some of these, a city like Austin gets so expensive that artists can't live there.
Exactly.
Nashville is a lot of people will say, is crossing this line where it's getting too expensive to live in Nashville, especially if you're a working musician. And so that appeal of a lower cost city like Memphis, and along with all its history and so on, just the pure economics of it are important to somebody who's trying to make a go of it.
Cost of living is a huge factor.
Yeah, and I want to point out that for, Elizabeth's role as far as the export piece goes and exporting Memphis music, Memphis has always exported music. We've always had showcases at conferences, at events, around the country. The difference in what she's doing is that she's partnered with the CVB. She's partnered with the chamber. Instead of the music community just talking amongst itself, instead of us saying, telling, the studio down the street that we're doing this event, or telling the record label, the independent label here that we're doing this event, this is what's going on. That's also being broadcast to the business community and to the city in general. And it's not just, I think that's one of the challenges that the music industry has had, is that people within the music industry, we know what's going on, but we don't communicate with the rest of the community because there is so much going on in Memphis at this point. Just each of us could probably name something that would blow your mind as far as, wow, that's going on in Memphis right now. And so we just don't talk to people outside of our sector, and that is changing. And it has to change in order for the music sector to be seen as an integral part of the Memphis economy, And
it truly is. Music is the heart of this city. Always has been, always will be. It's a talking point we can say over and over again, but it's definitely true. And music has its visibility, is our greatest export. It's homegrown. This is a great incubator for talent, for music. We're creating culture. We are truly authentic here in Memphis, and that's why we at the CVB also take Memphis music on the road. Sometimes you have to take that music on the road and give a little tease that says, come to Memphis and hear the rest of our story. And that's what we've done in partnering with Elizabeth, but also with all sorts of other organizations across Tennessee, Memphis, and the Southeast. For instance, Valerie June, another Memphis artist, going to Australia, touring and promoting Memphis and Tennessee as a music destination as well. And so those are things that we are always actively doing. We're investing in our local music community to make sure that those folks get a little taste of our music and come back and experience not only our music, but the best barbecue on both sides of the Mississippi.
All right, we're going to leave it there because that is all the time we have. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for joining us. Join us again next week.
Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
The business of Memphis music, tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. I'm joined tonight by Kevin Kern, Vice President, Memphis Convention and Visitors Bureau. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
Pat Mitchell-Worley, founder of Fanic Impact Across the Board. Talk a little bit about that.
Of course it is. The Memphis Convention and Visitors Bureau, our job is to bring visitors to Memphis. Our brand is music. The tagline, Memphis, birthplace of rock and roll, home of the blues. Tourism itself is a $3 billion plus industry in this city. So of course, music has a tremendous economic impact. It is Elvis, it's B.B. King, it's blues, rock, soul, that's bringing folks to this town. So $3 billion for tourism means that $3 billion for music as an economic impact in our city, because that is the main drawing point.
All right, and again, we'll dig into more of that. But Pat, talk about, we talked before the show about how to introduce you and which of your many hats we would lead with. We led with Fanfare CR. Talk about the scope and the many different ways, Beale Street Caravan, that you're involved in Memphis music and have been involved.
Okay. Musicians. And so I felt that was a scalable model, and I wanted to execute it on the city level. So about 2 years ago, in partnership with the Chamber initially, I launched Music Export Memphis. And actually just recently, we're officially chartered as a nonprofit organization. So we essentially exist to create opportunities for musicians to showcase their music, and hopefully in doing that, drive results in music tourism, economic development, and brand awareness of Memphis across the board. And prior to that, and sort of still alongside that, for about 6 years now, I've had my own music PR agency called Signal Flow, working with Memphis musicians exclusively and also music and tourism, music business, music nonprofits as well.
All right, and we'll dig into a bunch more of that as we go, but I'll go to you, Kevin, from the point of view of the Convention and Visitors Bureau. I mean, this is a big tourism draw. There's economic...
Okay, well, Fanfare, CR really focuses on working with arts organizations, not specifically music organizations, but Memphis Slim House is one of my clients. I went from a consulting role, now I'm on the advisory board for the organization, and it's a community center for musicians, and it allows them an opportunity to not only collaborate, but to learn about the business of music. So as a part of Slim House, there are members. The space serves as a rehearsal space. It serves as a place where artists can come together and they can go in and record a demo, or they can host an event there. Then there are a lot of educational, forums, workshops that we do there. Also, Memphis Slim House has a loan program that offers a
Fair CR, thanks for being here. Megan Carolan is a local musician and many other things in the local Memphis music scene. Elizabeth Cawein is founder of Music Export Memphis. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks.
So I wanted to do a show for a while, and we've talked about it on things going on with Memphis music, and you and I got to talking somewhere. And so I think the easiest thing, because all of you wear many hats in terms of music in Memphis and the business of it and so on, and I'll just go around and let you kind of describe, and in part because this started with a conversation we had about Music Export Memphis, talk about your involvement and talk about what the organization is, and we'll do that with everybody.
Sure. So Music Export Memphis is essentially an export office for Memphis music. It's modeled after the international export strategy. You see countries around the world that do this, that export their music and create opportunities for